Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning to those of you who are in the time zones that are west of me right now. I want to thank everyone for participating in our fifth and final program of the ABA YLD Investing in Wellbeing series we've been putting on this month. I hope you've enjoyed the programming, and we're finishing things off with a bang today. Today's program is titled Maintaining Your Resilience, Especially in Times of Crisis. Because today's program is a non-CLE program, we have an exciting opportunity to share this event with non-ABA members free of charge. So if you think this program would resonate with a friend or colleague, I strongly encourage you to share this with them. It is currently being streamed live on Facebook, and you can find the link to share it in the chat. Please also use the chat function to pose questions to our panelists during today's program. They have a ton of information to cover today, and they're going to try to get to every question that comes in, but they've also generously offered to answer questions via email following the program as well. It's now my great pleasure to introduce and personally thank our fantastic international panel of presenters. Joining us today from Montreal is Larry Markowitz, a business lawyer with 15 years of experience and the Senior Communications Advisor at National Public Relations, Canada's largest public relations firm. From Sweden, Johan Miron is a partner and founder of the Swedish law firm Cedric Law, where his practice is mainly oriented towards companies and high net worth individuals. And from Toronto is ABA friend Debra Forman, certified executive coach and founder of Pinstripe Coaching with more than 30 years of legal and business experience and expertise in law firm management. Thank you again to all of our panelists for being with us today. And Debra, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Whitney. I feel kind of old after that, but I did start around 10. But to the program, first of all, what I want to say, the three of us are thrilled to be here, but we are so impressed that the organizers shared with us at least 10 questions that have come in prior to the meeting, and the tenor of the questions really they're pretty symbiotic with what we're going to be talking about today. As Whitney said, we have a lot to cover. We hope to answer these questions. We will be available, not necessarily right after the thing, but you'll get our email addresses and you can reach us. But I'll tell you, the theme that has come through and that so impressed me are people saying, okay, what, like for instance, here's one from a recent law grad. I'd like to know how to best start over from prior experiences. So it really isn't couched in the pandemic. It isn't couched in, you know, what do I do? I'm kind of frozen here, and that to me, and I've been talking to my clients about this. That's a really great mindset to be in. I mean, I'm not saying that we close our eyes to what's going on, but I don't think, and we'll be talking about this, I don't think there's ever been a more level playing field than there has been for the last 13 months with the pandemic, because it's so global. And it's when something is just so huge as this has, it then provides what we're going to be talking a lot about are the opportunities and how you can do that. How are we going to do this? You know, I'm glad they kind of went along with my crazy idea. One thing I use in coaching when dealing with crises, and we're going to define crises for you in a minute, but I help people walk through by giving them 4 anchors to do it. And I call it the 4 R's. There's regret, there is responsibility, there's resilience, and then there's reform. And, you know, explaining to Johan and Larry about how I use this, we decided, well, why don't we use that as the structure for today's hour? So we got away from using PowerPoint, and what we're going to be doing instead are polls, P-O-L-L-S, so that all of you can play along. I feel like we're like Jeopardy at home, but you can play along with us as we do this, and we are going to be reacting the way that we'll react to the questions to your responses. And you know, we'll be giving our feelings towards it as well, but this will help to provide the questions that we have. So why don't we, Tracy, if you can put up the first poll. There we go. You know, did I make any mistakes this year? And oh, and there's only one answer. It would have been too easy if we let you fill in all the blanks. There's only one answer. So if you could take the time now to quickly respond, we will then be able to tally how we're doing. Okay, I'll give it another second. I typically can see when people respond. I can't. Tracy, do you see how many responses we have? I don't know. Well, let's show the okay. So is that interesting? So the two ties are afraid to ask for guidance and acted like a victim. With didn't trust my gut, or sorry, assumed we would go back to normal, didn't trust my gut, and missed opportunity. Oh, so there's only 7% who felt that. Okay, good. Why don't we talk about what it meant to act like a victim? Johan, I know that this was something that you wanted to lead off with.
Yeah, because I think that is the response that I personally go to when answering this question, because it's so easy. It's sort of the comfort zone, isn't it? I mean, to consider ourselves being a victim of something, a victim of a crisis, a victim of a problem, an issue, whatever. It is sort of the go-to place that always feels comfortable. That is to regard oneself to be the victim and someone else to blame, to have someone else to blame for the fact that I'm a victim of the circumstances. However, I think that is rather counterproductive to take that stance, because in the end of the day, it is about taking responsibility and taking ownership of any situation that we are faced with.
The only way to have resilience is to first take ownership and be able to be proactive. So it may not be the biggest crisis, but let's say you're stuck in traffic. You could say, oh, I'm a victim, I'm always stuck in traffic. It's once you've accepted that there is traffic, whatever your traffic is symbolically, it's only then that you could do something. So if you're stuck in traffic, you could say, well, this will be an opportunity to listen to an interesting podcast, for example. Now that's a very minor example, but the same principles apply to bigger crises in your life or in your professional practice.
And you know, before we go to define a crisis, the other reason why when we become a victim, it's negativity, and it's much easier to wallow in negativity because it's heavier. You know, that's why they say that when you're happy, you're like in seventh heaven, because it's light, but it's attaining that. A lot of us find it very difficult. It is so much easier to get down, and that's why it is important to either recognize it and then say, okay, what am I going to do about it? Before we go to the next poll, Johan, you were going to mention about like Larry touched on different crises. Did you have anything else that you wanted to add to that, or?
I think that personally, it's very important to make a distinction between what is a crisis, what is an issue, and what is a problem that I might have to face, like problems that we are facing on a daily basis at our offices. And for me, I made this distinction of what creates a crisis for me. And the way I see it is important to look at a given situation through various lenses to decide whether this is actually a crisis. I mean, apparently, the situation that we are in today is in many respects a huge crisis for the entire world, given the fact that it is a situation that affects many people, being it financially, being it on a personal level, being it the fact that we need to work from our home offices, which in itself creates new challenges, basically. And I read somewhere that the only one who can define if there is a crisis for you is yourself. I don't know if I fully agree to that conclusion, but it's quite an interesting take, the fact that we can own the definition of a current situation ourselves and not let the media or information that we are overthrown with over social media decide how to define a given situation, but rather go to ourselves and see if we can define the situation, if we will define the situation as a crisis.
Johan, you may define something as a crisis or maybe not a crisis, while your client defines a situation as a crisis. So I think we have to be sensitive to how our clients see things too, because as trusted advisors, as lawyers are, we're called upon to deal with crises. And I suppose you can't start off by saying, oh, it's nothing. If your client thinks it's a crisis, I think you have to accept that and then help them deal with it.
Well, but if I can just take that thread, there's usually 3 lenses through which to look at any situation. There'll be your lens, and then what Johan is saying is that you've got to kind of fix your glasses so you can see what's doing. What you're saying is to look through your client's lens, and it's really difficult to get into someone else's head and see what are they thinking, how are they feeling. I say you always go to the 3rd lens, which is the issue at hand. And so that will help recalibrate what it is that you want to do. So if it is, and I think I'll use an example now, that someone said, how to step away for a break when you cannot take a vacation. So what you need to do with that one, I mean, you could look through your lens and say, wow, I can't believe it. I've been stuck in my house. I can't go away. It then becomes like you're wearing blinders. You're seeing it through your own lens, and then you become the victim. That is an example of being a victim. You can then go into the firm's view lens or your client's lens and say, well, isn't that great? I have been putting in 24 hours a day for them. They don't realize that, I don't take a break. I can't believe that they're saying, well, no, you can't take a break. That again is becoming a victim. So what you do then is you go into and saying, all right, what is on my plate? What work am I doing? What has to get done? When did I want to take a vacation? What kind of timeline have I given? So you take all the emotion out, because when you're a victim, it's highly emotional. And that's why that's why I prefaced the talk by saying, we're all in this. And I know that there was the tagline, we're all in this together. We are all globally in this. But that's the level playing field. So what you need to do is then act responsibly. And I'm going to use that to segue, because what we're talking about now, I want us to get really into the meat of the discussion in a minute. But when you keep your eye focused on the business, I always say, follow the money, follow what is the discussion. When you keep your focus there, you then will do the right thing, because it's not about you. It's not about the client. It's about doing the right thing. And then there'll be that wiggle room to decide what it is, but it helps you stay focused on what is really the matter at hand. Guys, do you mind if we move to?
Let's do that. Let's do that. We set the stage and
okay.
Move forward now.
So here's number 2, responsibility. How can I continue to move forward?
I'm glad we're allowed to vote. I feel like I'm part of this.
I hope you're feeling part of it in other ways too.
I think so.
We'll give it another second. All right, Tracy, drum roll.
Oh, we have a winner.
That is. So that you embrace that shift happens. Hold myself accountable, pause and acknowledge, own my mistakes. Is that interesting? Okay, and view my. Well, that is great, because that's what I would do. You embrace that shift happens. I mean, and I've had a bunch of shift and the other come into my life over the past years. And again, you can roll up into a ball and hope that everything will get better. But today's theme is we are in control. And it doesn't mean that we stomp on people, but without taking that responsibility and saying and holding yourself accountable, you will not be able to move forward. And that's what this is all about. It's that momentum moving forward. Guys, do you have anything else to add to that before we move?
Yeah, I think that embrace that shift happens goes very in line with the first question that we discussed, and not be a victim. Because if you embrace the shift, if you embrace that something is changing, then hopefully you won't get stuck in your negative way of thinking. Or, I mean, it really comes down, as you're saying, Debra, to sort of accept the circumstances, accept the situation, and look at the possibilities, which is what we will talk more about later on. But it's very important not to get stuck in a negative way of thinking and consider yourself being a victim.
No, that we're in a situation of accelerated change, and the way I look at it, it's there's potential. There's business opportunities. We'll discuss that later. You have to take in my view, a positive attitude and be proactive. And it is what it is. Accept it, and we'll give some ideas soon on how you could leverage this situation of constant change. A lot of technological change that even a young lawyer could take advantage of, maybe even more than an experienced lawyer.
Okay, let's move on, Tracy, to number 3, because that's really where our topic is.
So here we've accepted the change. Now, how do we leverage it?
Well, and it's also, this is the now. This is this is what we're doing now, and not for the future, now. Give it another second. Okay, Tracy, let's see. Okay, focus on personal boundaries and change are tied. Wasn't that interesting how it's a two-way race? Reframe and appreciate what makes me happy. Manage my brand. Be effective. Okay, so what is very interesting about the choices is again that they're almost like the global ones. So what I think we will do is we're going to cut through them because that's why you brought us to come to you. So why don't we start off, and it's something that we've been kind of alluding to. Let's talk about the silver lining. And you know, I know, Larry, that we both feel very strongly. Well, we all do. But why don't you start us off with your views on the silver lining and what this pandemic has brought us?
Well, it's been a refocusing of priorities. I think people are, in some cases, a little more appreciative of experiences in life. And you know, when you're locked in your home and you can't do the simple things like go for a coffee and have those serendipitous meetings at the water cooler in the office, you appreciate that a lot more. You can't see your family. We're going to appreciate that a lot more. So that's on a personal level. On a professional level, there already were a lot of technological changes, digitization of businesses. That's really been affecting the legal practice. You know, courts, which had been maybe talking about doing virtual hearings, suddenly have had to do them in most jurisdictions. And if they haven't, I mean, they're a year behind now. So that actually gives opportunities for young lawyers, or any lawyer. You could do more hearings from the comfort of your office. In a day, you could be in 3 places in the same state and participate in 3 trials without having any travel time. And I think on a personal level, another thing that's you could leverage at least is the fact that you could choose how to balance your personal and professional lives. Instead of having to fit in all your work from 9 to 5 when you're in the office, you can now work your personal life around, to some extent, your professional life. So I've touched a lot of themes, and but that's why this is the biggest section of our talk today.
Well, let me ask you something, and I'll pose it to all of us. One of the questions is, how do you suggest handling perfectionism? And this is an interesting one. Well, first of all, it's an interesting thing because, again, it gets back to the lenses. I mean, I know for years people have said you've got to understand what the client is asking you or the firm is asking. Do they want you to make do they want you to make a bicycle, or do they want a Ferrari? And it's, those are obviously two extremes, but it's always understanding what is being asked of you. With the current situation, because there's been some changes how people can access things. I know, talking to people, they've been saying, you know what, it's not that I'm cutting corners, but all of a sudden I'm allowed to do this, or I'm allowed to do that. So when anytime with perfectionism, I mean, this is my thinking, is that, again, it's always in the eye of the beholder. Nothing is ever going to be perfect. And but it's understanding what is needed, what makes sense, how, because you can always make something better, but sometimes is better, is good enough. And that's where you need to have an understanding of what it is that you're doing to gauge that. I'm curious what the two of you have found with this past year and dealing with something like that.
I think, just as a general remark to start with, to be a perfectionist is an asset in our profession if we look at it from the aspect that it is required from us as lawyers, as business lawyers, that we cover a lot of different angles of the same problem. We need to have integrity towards our clients, and in order to have that, we also need to be a perfectionist. We can't cut corners. We can't do shortcuts just because the client wants us to take a shortcut. But to be a perfectionist can also be a personal problem, of course, if you can't deliver, if you won't accept that it is good enough, sort of. So it is also about setting the standard for yourself in your daily practice, because you can't spend 3 hours on an email that would take 15 minutes to write just to be it should be perfect. But the trick is to be a perfectionist within the 15 minutes it takes you to write the email, and safeguard that you actually are covering all the angles, because perfectionism is an asset in our profession.
But you should show yourself a certain amount of compassion, as you should if you're managing others, especially in these times. But also, and this is a principle that we follow in crisis management, you don't have to know everything. Maybe your client asked you about a topic you don't know about. I would say, admit, look, this is a new topic for me. I will explore it, but I am not the biggest expert. Give me an hour, let me look into this, and then we'll see where we are then. Instead of assuming that you have to, create a PhD thesis on the topic. You don't have to be the world's biggest expert on everything. You start the process. Perhaps you should not be afraid to consult with colleagues, even if you have to do it by Zoom calls or telephone calls. But show some compassion for yourself. It's a much healthier way to deal with the plague of perfectionism or imposter syndrome, or all these things that many lawyers who are trained to be perfectionists suffer sometimes.
And I think it's also important to understand the difference, like to kind of segue from what Larry was saying, the difference between to respond and to answer. Too often people will get frozen because they'll get an email or a call, and I'm finding that people are calling more. I don't know if you two are, but I'm finding clients call me more now, and they want to Zoom more, like they just want that immediate contact. And sometimes it's understanding, do you give someone an answer right away, or do you respond? You say, look, I'm on it, I'll get back to you. It might take me a little bit of time, and this is always this isn't something that is crisis driven. It's again, as we said, because anything can be a crisis depending on how how you're seeing it. But these are resilient measures. And I think that's where our foci is, that helping you be resilient and to maintain the best regardless of the situation. And this if you wanted a tough situation, your calls of cry were heard, because there hopefully will not be another one like this for another 100 years. But it does test out your resilience. Now, someone asked here, how do you avoid being crushed by the feeling of being overwhelmed? And that's almost the ugly sister to being a perfectionist, because sometimes when you do become a perfectionist, or you think everything has to be exact, then you become overwhelmed. You're afraid to kind of pull the plug, or you're afraid to push the send button to say, oh my God, did I really just let it go? And what would the two of you say about the feeling of overwhelm?
Our first choice was personal and professional boundaries, and you have to set certain boundaries. Johan, sorry, I cut you off, but.
No worries at all. I mean, the way I would do it when I feel overwhelmed by something is to start working with it. Because my biggest problem is that I actually believe what I'm thinking. And it isn't always right what I'm thinking. And this is sort of a core saying that I use. You shouldn't always believe what you're thinking, because I can be thinking, oh, it's so much at the moment. I have this and this and this on my plate right now. Well, if you start to structure the different tasks that you need to do, perhaps it will show you that you shouldn't be overwhelmed. It is controllable. You don't have too much on your plate. It is possible to do it if we just structure it in the right way, and if we don't hide towards our clients, because I can see that from time to time, not only with myself, but also with my colleagues, that it is so easy to sort of not respond to the client in a situation when the client is actually just looking for a short answer. As you were saying before, Debra, I'm on it. That's all the client is looking for at the moment. And due to the fact that we feel overwhelmed, we are hiding behind our computers, and we don't send that short email, just sort of confirming that I will look into this, I will respond. That is often just what the client is looking for.
They want reassurance. They want peace of mind. Part of the brand of a good lawyer is you're selling peace of mind. The client, have a problem. I put it onto your desk, the lawyer, and then it's a question of setting expectations. So you say, I'm on it. Is it okay if I get this answer to you by the end of the week? Yes, they might say, no, I need it tomorrow. But although this week, tomorrow is the end of the week, but let's say it was Monday. In that case, you negotiate the boundaries. Don't assume everything is a 4-alarm fire. There's urgent and there's important, and they're not always the same thing. So that's something to keep in mind, I think.
And to get back to what we were talking about, because I think that's, again, a very good overall theme for today, are those 3 lenses, because it could be a 4-alarm fire in your head. And that's something that only you can, again, not to get too trite here, but you could put that fire out by redirecting your focus. Sit there and say, oh, I don't know what to do. You become frozen, you become numb. And then if you sit there and say, wait a minute, you pause, and that's again, it's like what we're doing with our 4 R's. You sit there and say, okay, you regret, or you pause, or whatever, you take responsibility, and now you're at the area that you take action. And that's where we are now with our in this part of the webinar. And what you want to do, again, focus on the issue, get out of your head, because that a lot of these questions here about handling perfectionism, how do I prevent myself from being seen as arrogant or egotistical? Don't make it about you. It's about what the client wants, but it's what they want, the thing. And when we focus on something that's inanimate, that's just a thing, it diffuses. It's like you put a pin and it takes all the sting of anything being arrogant or being perfection, because you're focusing on getting this thing done. So to do that, if we can move, let's say, to, do either of you have any tips on being nimble and being flexible, and maybe we could even put in about with the pivoting and change that people have had to do during the last year?
Well, there have been a lot of new business opportunities that have come up because of the pandemic. These are examples of entrepreneurs who have suddenly become nimble and pivoted their businesses. You see it in the restaurant business. Those who pivot properly went into delivery and did it successfully, or opened up ghost kitchens where they got rid of the restaurant part of the restaurant. It's just a kitchen and it delivers. I don't know, Johan, have you seen any examples among your clients? Because you tend to deal with a lot of entrepreneurs these days, I think, more than I do.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some great examples, I would say, of people who are using the crisis around us as an opportunity to develop or to refine their own business model by, for instance, introducing digital tools. Just look at the lawyers. I mean, for us, it has become necessary to be flexible, because I can honestly say that before the crisis hit us, I wasn't using Zoom or Teams. I had them on my computer. I'd used them on a few occasions, but I mean, now I'm using them on a daily basis, and it became necessary for me to be flexible in the beginning of the crisis and adopt to sort of using these tools in my practice. How do I build sort of the confidence that you were talking about, Larry, before, the fact that we are selling comfort towards our clients? How can I do that using a screen instead of a face-to-face meeting? Because I have my techniques for sort of making the client feel comfortable in a physical meeting. But how do I adopt those tools into providing the same sense of comfort, but doing it through a screen like we are doing right now? And I think that shows that it wasn't necessary for us to be flexible, that we really were flexible in the beginning of the crisis.
And since my clients are lawyers, I can say that I've picked up almost a side hustle of helping people pivot into their own law firms. It's last year, it was quite something how many people I was helping to set up their own shop. And they were doing it for a whole bunch of reasons. Some of them were very successful where they were, but they realized that they were very happy being independent, working on their own. They saw that they were making more money if they did it on their own. And they were already having the tools at hand, whether it was having the connectivity, having the hardware, the software, whatever they needed. They realized it was just almost to kind of pull the switch. And what has, again, for me being the coach among us, what I have been seeing with people is the grabbing the risk. And some of them, I mean, I was doing a lot of coaching with people that were let go because they were, let's say if they were internal, like in-house lawyers, and a lot of in-house lawyers were let go if they weren't a profit center. So, and I was helping with the ACC. I was helping people figure out what to do, and it's funny. A client asked me the same question the other night. They would say to me, should I go get an MBA? Like, what would you suggest? And I said, well, if you think that would make sense, but you want to do something that is going, again, for me, it's always keep your eye on the business. Compliance is huge now. I said, if you had an interest in bankruptcy is definitely not going to go away.
Yeah, restructuring is big. We see that in public relations.
And so what I was telling them, go and get, like, for instance, all the different countries have set up compliance, and Europe, it's GDPR, it's Castle in Canada, like it's all the different things, but they're all stemming from the same kind of legislation. It's a cottage industry. So if people are thinking, what do I want to do? How can I do it? I was telling people, think of a skill that you then can apply. It's like when Larry mentioned about the restaurant. I mean, Toronto was in even more. We had been in the longest lockdown of any part of the country because of what was going on in Toronto. And so and I know the date was my birthday, from November 23rd up until March 8th, we were in a solid lockdown. So the restaurants, I mean, they still haven't opened. I haven't been in a restaurant in a year. But one very fancy restaurant realized that the number one food that people were getting was pizza. And he got a private equity company to support him, and he's done really well. He's now, I don't know if he's going to go back to his restaurant once he's able to, but he's opening up a plant, and he's focusing on high-end frozen pizza. And in a piece I read that he said, I would never have thought I would do this, but he saw the need. And he looked, and it's like brewers who are making hand sanitizer. I mean, people are realizing that there is, you keep your eye on the business and you think what it is that makes sense.
But in the business that we as lawyers are in, it's an intellectual business. And because of the online world, the cost of doing business has gone down. You technically don't really need an office anymore. Maybe for legal reasons you do, but you could rent a very small office or a space in someone else's office. It's the same thing you saw with the startups from Silicon Valley and from all over. They took advantage of the fact that everything can now be done online, and they created new business models. So that's certainly an advantage we have as lawyers. If you're in an area of law that allows you to serve people in multiple jurisdictions, well, here we are, Montreal, Toronto, and Sweden, and people from all over the United States on the same call. You're not my clients, but it would be just as easy to serve you as my client as it is to serve someone down the street at this point, because I can't even meet the people down the street. And you mentioned GDPR. A lot of younger lawyers are more familiar with technology and all that it entails. And that means internet law, let's call it that, is an excellent opportunity for young lawyers, of whom there are many in our audience today.
But I also see a development in sort of traditional fields of law, like real estate, for instance. It is not only the fact that, as you're saying, Larry, some law firms are looking at downsizing their offices because people want to work from home, and they realize that they don't need to have a desk for each and every co-worker. They can have more flexible solutions, etc. That is a development that we are seeing. But in various European countries, we are also seeing new rules relating to how big should an office be? How many meters should there be between the co-workers? Of course, this is for the reasons of the pandemic, etc. But that's a new field of law that is suddenly developing out of the crisis. And if you're flexible enough, you can identify that, you can see that, and that will, in the end of the day, become a business opportunity for you.
Interior design law, but I'm saying it flippantly, but that's a great idea. And if you could, to get to public relations, or maybe it's marketing, become the expert in that topic in your area. Get yourself quoted in the media, let the reporters, the local paper know about you, and you become the expert on designing offices and all the laws related to space per employee.
It doesn't take long to become an expert. And again, pandemic or no pandemic, I've been telling people for years, you do something once, twice, and there are so many, you can blog about it, you can just put something out, and then all of a sudden you become an expert. I mean, that's how we're here. I mean, I know I've only been doing this since I was 10, and I'm only 15, but it doesn't take long to build up that expertise. Let me ask you, let's move to return on investment and what it means for the individual, like for each of the people that are listening to us. How do they evaluate, put a valuation on what we're talking about?
Well, it's not just a money return. It can also be a happiness return, a satisfaction return. If you have better work-life balance, well, it's good. If your health gets better, for example, make sure you eat well, sleep well, go for a walk every day. These are things that people who are commuting for 2 hours a day might have been neglecting before. Now is an opportunity to get your life back in order in that way. Or if it was already in order in that way, now is the opportunity to take, say, your commuting time and learn a new skill. Read up on it during the time you would have been commuting.
But then to be the counter, one of the questions here is, how do you avoid and remedy burnout? Because I know, and I know clients have talked to me about this, is that, it's they if the kids are learning at home, or if they go to school, or if they're single or whatever, you turn on the computer, you're there, you might grab something to eat, you eat in front of the computer, you have some calls, you might do it because you can't go out, you're not going to go out, or maybe you can go out, you'll go out for bed, and then you push repeat and start it again the next day. What have you found? What can you suggest to help people with that kind of repetitive burnout?
I think that, as Larry is pointing out, one important factor is to build up routines that you have on a daily basis. Being it have a walk every day, or having breathing exercises, or pause every hour for a minute or two, to set these routines into your daily life is extremely important. Because
what new routines have you done?
I have my walk. I try to go for a walk every day. I try to do breathing exercises. Those are sort of my main ways of keeping my mind in a better shape, basically. But I find it challenging, this huge paradox between the flexibility that we suddenly have when we are doing all the work from home. We are completely flexible. I mean, we can work early in the morning, we can work late in the evening, we can have 2 hours of lunch break if you want to. It's sort of it's an endless. We have endless opportunities with the way that we are performing our work. But at the same time, as we were pointing out before, it is so important to set these boundaries between your professional life and your private life. And that has been a huge challenge for myself, I can say, for the last year. The fact that I almost need to sort of set the boundaries and say that it's Sunday, it's not a work day, it's off limits to go into the office and do a little bit of work, because it's so easy. And if you constantly work, then, as Larry was pointing out, suddenly you won't be sleeping as good as you should, you won't be resting as much as you should, and this becomes a spiral that goes down, and you become less effective.
You have to set certain boundaries. I could think the public relations firm where I work, they encouraged us in group meetings not to bother each other at lunchtime, which I guess technically speaking would mean I shouldn't be talking to you right now because it's my lunchtime. But in general, people seem to respect that. For me, I'm not too bothered, but generally it works. So that's a simple barrier. But another barrier you could set is setting out time in your calendar where you will not answer messages. If need be, put an out of office message and say, look, I'm in meetings all afternoon and I can't talk to you, in more polite terms, of course. And there's a use for that, because a lot of the work that lawyers do, that any of us do, is very focused on mental focus, on concentration. And if you keep on being interrupted, that's annoying too. So, don't spend all your time looking at emails and focus on one thing at a time, as Debra had said.
But I know, Larry, in the beginning of the crisis, your firm set out daily meetings, didn't you? Daily Teams meeting at 9 o'clock in the morning or something like that. Isn't that also a way of creating a daily routine, something that is repeated every day? You also get the social interaction, even if it is limited through our digital screens. Nevertheless, you get some social interaction, and you have sort of a meeting a day that is just with your colleagues.
That's very true. Well for you? It's worked very well. They're not daily meetings anymore. I remember we discussed that, I think last April or May.
Yeah.
When we did a different webinar things have changed since then. It's interesting. But anyhow, we have regular meetings. It allows for a little bit of chit chat also. It's not all business. I've read there's all kinds of articles on this by now, and people sometimes complain, oh, I have no social contact with my coworkers. These Zoom calls are all business. And then other people will say, well, there was too much chit chat. It wasn't business enough. One solution might be, if you're running these kinds of meetings, have the meeting and then afterwards say, look, if anyone wants to stick around, we'll have some informal chit chat, something to kind of replace the water cooler talk. And building up that kind of social capital is really how a business builds up a culture. You could manage a business by Zoom, but can you really build a culture by Zoom?
And I think what, I had a home office before all this, but I traveled so much. And now for me at the beginning, it was, I didn't want to feel like the pages of the calendar were flying off every, like, oh, I'm the same thing. So what I did, my dog became part of my anchor. Because he was so used to me traveling. Now, if he doesn't see me in a room, he starts barking, wondering where I am. And I have now set up my day, and to help structure him, every 4 hours, we go for a good walk. So I deal with clients on multiple different time zones. So I will set it up, when it makes sense and I can do this, but so that he, that I've got to get him out and people understand. I don't sit there and say, oh, well, I've got to do it to my dog's schedule, but I am able to take care of his needs, me getting out, and so I'm not just tied to the desk and the pages of the calendar are flying off. And it gave me a new routine. And I think I mentioned to you guys when we were talking about this, the other thing I did, because I had to make things feel that there was a change. I started putting on my phone that I could change the wallpaper color to a different color every day. So I thought, oh, okay, today it's pink. Oh, it's blue. Because otherwise you sit there and think, what day is it? And that, it sounds so weird, but people I talked to said, hey, I'm going to do that. That was a kind of a different thing, because the days start falling. But as Larry was saying, that they don't do the meetings as much, and I know whether it's my family or clients, they say, yeah, we are doing the water cooler stuff, we do the drinks. That has kind of fallen to the wayside, because this is now that was an artificial, taking from the fire hose. What do we do? Now we've settled in. And it is getting, that's why the questions that we've had, that we've hopefully been weaving in, have become more normalized about how we cope. It doesn't have to be as artificial, but it has to be, well, then how, like the question, well, how do I interact with my client? And I keep telling people, your clients don't want to hang out with you. They're under the same restrictions that we're under, but you want to find a way that makes sense for you to reach out to them. How can you? Someone is saying, well, how do I network? What tips do you have because I know both of you do quite a bit on the networking, both offline and online, so that you do keep your touch with that client.
Well, I think certainly networking is a big question. There are all kinds of webinars. Different associations that I'm a part of have gone on to Zoom calls. One thing some of those organizations have started doing is using the breakout room feature, which allows you to have a little chit chat in smaller groups before the presentation to the group of 100, let's say. So that's one idea. We have a bit of experience and we've built up networks. I'm wondering, Debra or Johan, if you have any suggestions for the younger lawyers who maybe haven't built up such a network and now suddenly have to do it online, because you're not going to bump into someone in the street most likely nowadays, or in a cocktail party for sure.
No, well, and I think even pre-pandemic, I would tell people that if you, let's say, went to an association, and I know this is an ABA sponsored thing.
Let's use that as an example.
Yeah,
then.
No offense here, but sometimes if you would go to one ABA meeting a year, you might end up at a dinner or at a seminar and luck of the draw, sit next to someone that there's great synergies, there's potential sharing of work, but that really is like, you know, putting your money onto a lottery ticket. Like it's hard to know if you're going to do that. So with the ABA, for instance, I mean, we're part today of the ABA YLD. If you aren't a member, and I forget, I think it's like 37, or there's an interesting number that's kind of the cutoff to join. Look up and see whether you know, you qualify, what makes sense, when do they have meetings. It's an extremely, I did some coaching with the ABA YLD for a few years. It's a very interactive, highly involved group. And, you know, the three of us met with a European one called Aisha that goes up to 45. I mean, there are different things. Industry. If you're in the, if your clients are in the restaurant business, you know, we'd be using that as an example, or in real estate, there's so many different organizations that are industry related that you can join. Diversity. If you are diverse in whichever way, you know, there might be an association that you can join that appeals to what makes sense for you. And so when you think about what there was in person, there are so many now that are online. I don't know, LinkedIn has groups. If you go to your homepage of LinkedIn, and you might not see it on the top panel, but there is something called groups, and there's tons of different groups, and you might see something there that appeals to you. If you know, you put in, I mean, women at law, if you want to join that one, or real estate, or startups, or I mean, let's say you're from Canada, cannabis. I mean, like there's so many different things that you can look up, and everyone is doing it because they were even doing it before the pandemic. Because
yeah, the use of LinkedIn is way up apparently.
Yeah, I mean, we are such, well, did you know that LinkedIn really started right before the recession in 2009? Two buddies set it up because they lost their jobs, and they wanted a community. We always want a community. We're human, and we need, but sometimes the touch can't be that personal. Sorry, Johan.
No, I just wanted to go back to the question from Larry and the question that we have received, how to keep contact with the clients. LinkedIn is an excellent example. Networking is challenging. I agree with you there, Larry, that the breakout rooms, okay, they work, but it's not as good as I would like it to be. Nevertheless, I try to think that I should add value to my clients without sending a bill for it. So what I try to do is, when I see a new case, for instance, that is coming from the court, that I find to be interesting for my client, for a specific client of mine, then I will just write him an email, sending the case, summarizing the case. It is highly appreciated. You will often get work from that email due to the fact that you have found something that is relevant for the client. But it doesn't have to be a court case, even a newspaper article that is interesting for the client. If you send that, if you write a personal email, okay, it might take you 15 or 20 minutes to write that email, but in the end of the day, it's well worth it, because you are truly just aiming at the client and he feels selected.
It gives you an excuse to, it's a touch point. I think the Debra's used this term, a touch point.
Yeah, it is a touch point.
Debra trained you well, Johan.
So can we segue then to our last?
Yeah,
you know,
we have 5 minutes to go, so let's do that.
No, we've got a few minutes. No, Tracy, not the last poll, but the last point. Yeah, Larry, don't jump the gun on me. The last point in resilience, which is about business plan and business development, because what you two were just talking about now, the touches, the reaching out, the LinkedIn, all this should be part of a business plan. And anyone who's listening, if you don't have a business plan, you are in the majority. In fact, I mean, this is my area of expertise, and I have found that people think that those are probably the two of the dirtiest words that are in our lexicon, business plan, because the fear is that if you put something down, you're then glued to it. And what I've been helping people with the pandemic and their business development is that you've got this fluidity. You don't have to worry about that what you're going to do is going to be ironclad. Go with the flow. So I'd love to hear what the two of you might be able to suggest about with what's going on with business, well, and Johan, you're well, both of you, because Larry, I don't know when you joined National, but I know Johan started Cedric right before the pandemic. So I would love to hear from two of you very quickly.
I've had half my experience in the real world and half in the virtual world.
So what? But
what I could say, I've definitely increased the amount of writing that I've been doing. So one trend, a sad one in the pandemic, is cyber attacks. So we've been writing a lot with my colleagues on that topic. And also I've been taking opportunities that would have been in person to give talks, kind of like this one, but doing them online. And the two of you have been on more than one with me. So certainly take advantage of the fact that you could reach anyone on their computer and give talks, teach people things, write and teach. I think those are good personal branding exercises that will pay dividends.
Johan?
Yeah, I can admit to the fact that I had a business plan in place and I was fortunate enough to be able to stick to that business plan as regards the focus of the clients, etc. But I haven't been able to do the kind of personal networking that I really wanted to do. But in the end of the day, it has proven to be possible to actually adjust some of the marketing tools, and so far we have been very fortunate, but at the same time we are humble when it sort of comes to the situation, because we don't know anything about the effects in the long run. What happens when you don't have these creative meetings with the client that you would normally have face to face, and the client says, well, we are planning to do this in 12 months time, and you give some initial advice relating to that, and in 12, 14 months, 16 months, you have a new assignment on your desk. And we are sort of, I think, as many lawyers, we are still living out of those assignments that would have been generated before the pandemic. So I think it's important to be humble, basically. Well,
then this is a good segue. Tracy, if you can put up our last poll. This is now for everyone. We've hopefully have fed you some interesting food for thought tips. This is now where you commit, and it's the fourth. And in any crisis, you say, I made a mistake. I take responsibility. This is what I'm going to do now. But now, what we want you to do, and it's like with Johan, maybe this will be good for him to hold himself accountable to his business plan. But this is what you want to do here is commit. And we would love you to kind of mark down what you're going to commit to.
Yeah, this is your homework. This is the homework portion of our polls. But
it's yours. It's yours to own and keep it fluid.
Yeah.
Give it a second, and then we will close this off. Why don't we, Tracy, can you show the results, please? Take more, accept risks.
There's some entrepreneurs out there. That's good.
Building routines.
That's good.
This is fantastic. Mm-hmm. Well, this is it's a good point for us to pass back the baton to Whitney.
Thank you guys so much. This was absolutely terrific. So many wonderful takeaways for me. I really appreciate you guys coming and speaking to us. Thank you, Johan, Debra, and Larry. Loved every minute of it. I also want to thank all of you participating at home or from your offices for taking part in today's program and participating throughout the month in our Investing in Wellbeing series. Please visit the ABA YLD website for additional well-being resources and programming for young lawyers. And I hope everyone has a healthy and resilient day. Thanks again. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
It was fun.
Bye.